Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this new video in which we continue our close reading of Dialectic of Enlightenment by Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer. Today we're going to read the last section of the culture industry, and this section focuses on advertisement. We explained last time how the culture industry generates pseudo-individuality and how it hijacked the Kantian concept of beauty as purposiveness without purpose, and that is to turn culture into a purposeless entity that works for the purposes of the market. We explained how that gave a paradoxical account of culture, that the more culture becomes disinterested and disengaged with market laws, the more marketable it becomes. We use the expression saleable but not for sales. In other words, culture becomes an ad, basically. When you see an ad of a burger and it looks so tasty, but then when it arrives on your plate, it looks nothing like the ad. Like the ad was all talk, like the charisma of a leader, precisely. It's all talk, but the product itself is like it's like not there. The product that you saw in the ad is non-existent, actually, and the product that you get, actually you cannot use it to get what the ad promised you'd get from the product. The ad promised me that I would eat a tasty burger, but there is nothing tasty about what I put in my mouth. All of the value of the burger was actually in the ad. And so culture becomes a commodity. It is a commodity. It works like an ad. It delivers nothing of what it promises. Quote, it's culture. It is so completely subject to the law of exchange that it is no longer exchanged. It is so blindly equated with use that it can no longer be used. For this reason, it merges with the advertisement. So culture becomes like advertisement. Like advertisement, it needs to keep the consumer hooked up on it without delivering the promised end product. The culture knows that the consumer is completely and constantly dissatisfied, and it cannot answer to that. It cannot satisfy the consumer because it just delivers non-tasty burgers. But it knows that people can live without it. People can live without burgers. They can just say, well, we don't need this shit, so why bother with it? So it needs something to keep itself in the game, to be omnipotent, to have its tentacles in every single corner of society. And what maintains it? Well, precisely it is this life elixir, this advertisement. Like advertisement is the life energy of economy, and it is also the life energy of culture in Dialectic of Enlightenment. Being unable to actually please, the culture industry will resort to advertisement. Okay, like culture promises you that it will emancipate you, that it will liberate you from oppression and all of that. But seeing that it's not delivering what it promised, it needs something to keep itself, legit, to keep, to maintain this dream of emancipation or of freedom, of equality, whatever. And so it is going to it's going to become advertisement. It's going to resort to advertisement strategies and technique to substitute the pleasure of just promising from actual pleasure. Okay, it's going to replace actual pleasure with just the pleasure of promising. What you are supposed to get pleasure from, it's not the end product, but it's the promise of pleasure. Okay, you get pleasure from the promise of pleasure. I tell you, hey, I promise you that I'm going to liberate you, and that's what you are supposed to get pleasure from, not actual freedom, no, the promise of freedom. So the end product of an ad is not the product, but the promise of the pleasure that the product is supposed to bring you. So you are not supposed to have pleasure eating the burger, but you are supposed to enjoy the promise that you will get pleasure from eating the burger. So advertisement here shifted from its original purpose. Like at first it was just a guide to help consumers know about the products and be able to distinguish between the products. It oriented buyers and suppliers in the market and facilitated choice and transactions. Basically it saved labor time. But as the industry grew, and the market arrived at at its end with the growing monopolies and combines. Their advertisement shifted to another purpose. It became the whole point of the economic apparatus. The point of the economy is not to sell products, it is to produce ads. So economic competition becomes not about who has the best product, but who can produce the most, and if they can, the best, or if they care, the best ads. So if you have a business but you cannot afford to make advertisements, then no matter how good your business or your product is, your business is going to die. And those who can afford to do ads, well, they are already powerful. They have a lot of assets, enough to pay the fees of the advertisement agencies, as the authors say. Only those who can keep paying the exorbitant fees charged by the advertising agencies, and most of all by radio itself, that is, those who are already part of the system and are co-opted into it by the decisions of banks and industrial capital, can enter the pseudo market as sellers. So in other words, only the monopolies remain as sellers in some sort of simulation of a market, because only they can afford to do advertisement. And being able to do so means that you are on par with the rest of the combines, meaning that the money spent to make the ads eventually stays within the system. The money simply floats from monopolies to capital industries to the banks and back to the monopolies' pockets. It is a closed and sealed off system in which the agents are all from the same class. So their competition is a competition among peers, designed to keep unwanted outsiders out of the game. So it's like when you have big families controlling the economy and they don't let anyone into the competition. They have their hands on the market and no one outside their social class can compete with them. So they decide on what economic policies should be adopted, what is best for their own interest as a class. Their power of influence is like, the economic councils of industrials, where they meet and decide what is the best strategy to have to gain more power and more profit. Quote, they guarantee that the wielders of influence remain among their peers, not unlike the resolutions of economic councils, which control the establishment and continuation of businesses in the totalitarian state. So it's like basically it's the equivalent of the World Economic Forum today. Advertisement has therefore the function of distinguishing which economic object or subject is loyal to the system and which one is disloyal to it. If you can make an ad to sell your product, then obviously you can afford it, which means that you are one of us. But if you are trying to enter this business while unable to afford ads, then you are definitely not one of us and you must be kept away. Quote, advertising today is a negative principle, a blocking device. Anything which does not bear its seal of approval is economically suspect. So advertisement is a social marker. It is not about the product, but which social class you belong to whom you answer in the social hierarchy. It's about reminding you who is in charge. So basically it's about prestige, like art is now about prestige. Adorno and Horkheimer even say that during war times, there were products that were no longer available, but we still made ads for them, just to display industrial power. Like when you go to war, you must remember why you are fighting for. You are doing it for the business, you are doing it for the economy, you are doing it for advertising. So remember why, and especially who you are fighting for at wars. So ads just make sure that the consumers stay chained to the monopoly, but to the monopoly so that they stay loyal to it. And so the techniques of advertisement were so potent that they become ubiquitous. Advertising is now like literally everywhere. Everything you see, everything must become an ad. Everything must convey power. Adorno and Horkheimer, they give the example of big buildings, of big companies, like the skyscrapers of the Rockefellers and the Wrigley. They argue that they have become so powerful that the architecture itself is advertising their power. They don't need to put ads on the walls. They are just straight up explicit. We are powerful and we do whatever the hell we want. Like full-on display of power is brought in daylight. And in contrast, he compares the buildings of the 19th century, which come from an era of consumer goods, where advertising was still about the product and not about, an abstract display of power. And those buildings, they argue, have ads all over them. The landscape becomes a mere background for signboards and symbols. It's like the old buildings are still needing to be polished to have, the sign and symbol on them, whereas the new building are the sign and symbol itself. It's like the buildings of the 19th century are still going through their process of disenchantment. The distinction between the thing and the sign, which we said is the feature of enlightenment. It is acting on them until they reach the divine level of the sign, the word, in which the word becomes itself the thing. It's funny how things played out. Like enlightenment began as a rejection of magic and metaphysics, but ended up in the most oppressive, totalizing, and hardcore magical thinking and metaphysics ever. The monopolies really take themselves to be God, to be magicians that can alter the world through their symbols. In other words, advertising becomes simply the art with which Goebbels presciently equated it, l'art pour l'art, advertisement for advertising's sake, the pure representation of social power. So Goebbels, I think that's how it is pronounced, was the guy. He was the guy behind all of Nazi Germany's propaganda. So therefore, Adorno and Horkheimer, there is no distinction between Nazi propaganda and advertisement. In both cases, we are witnessing a raw display of power rooted in the idea of art for art's sake, which we already explained. We saw what was wrong with that idea. But basically, the focus of advertisement is no longer products or services, but advertisement itself. It's like the trailer is just promoting itself and not the film. Those instances where the trailer is better than the film? Well, the culture industry wants that, a trailer better than the movie. Even when you watch a movie, they argue it's like watching a trailer for the next movie. Every film is actually the trailer for another film. And so the best example is that of celebrity magazines, where the authors, they say that you cannot even know which part is actually the advertisement part. Like the ads look more real than the editorial sections, as if the editorial was actually aiming at the advertising more than the main content of their magazines. Quote, the enthusiastic and unpaid picture story about the living habits and personal grooming of celebrities, which wins them new fans, is editorial, while the advertising pages rely on photographs and data so factual and lifelike that they represent the ideal of information to which the editorial section only aspires. So, in all of this, they argue the individual disappears, like the product disappears from the ad. All you see is advertisement. Even things that are not ads, well, they have to be seen as ads. And ads are ads about other ads. So it's the same principle of sameness and dispensability that we talked about. The content, which is supposed to be the most important thing, the substance, the essence, is replaced by just the form. And the form is the marketable. It's the marketable. Whatever matters insofar as it can be turned into an ad. So it's like a work of art doesn't have any content anymore. They're just, a process, a certain style, and it's the style that matters. All you have to do is just replace the elements of the story, but what must be preserved is the style of storytelling. Like no one cares about characters, plots, message, or moral of stories. All that matters is if the story follows the legitimate style. Work is therefore only limited to a respect of style. Anything else is considered personal and individual. So it's like people telling you it's just your opinion, man. That sentence simply means that your opinion, being an opinion and being yours, has no value in the most important things. You know, your opinion is just for you, it's just for your private little world in which you hold no power, of course. So the only thing that matters, however, it's the universal that transcends your personal opinion. It is that everyone gets to be entitled to one opinion. Like, as long as the process of forming powerless and insignificant opinions that can pose no threat to the process itself, then you are allowed to have all opinions that you want. What we care about is not your opinion, but the process of forming opinions. You know, that's what we mean by freedom. You know, freedom simply means that we make sure that people, you know, can form their opinions, but of course their opinions they must keep them to themselves, of course. So their opinions have to be inoffensive. They have to be, you know, just for their own personal taste or whatever. But we never, you know, consider the opinions themselves. You know, we don't value the opinions. We just value the process of everyone is free to make their opinions. So you can have all the opinions that you want, but you must keep them to yourself. As such, the individual is, you know, the irreplaceable, and what is held outside the work. Okay, the individual is outside the work. Quote, the individual moment is being detachable, replaceable, estranged, even technically from any coherence of meaning. It lends itself to purposes outside the work. So, like in the process of production, every single moment is kept apart, just like each opinion of each individual must remain private. A production process is, after all, a series of individual moments. To produce a chair, you need a moment of chopping of wood, a moment of trimming it, to carve it, to assemble it. These are individual moments, but they each have their own importance. You cannot say that to make a wooden chair, the moment I chop off the wood isn't important or doesn't partake in the work, right? It doesn't stand outside the work. You know, the moment you chop off the wood stands in the work, not outside of it. And so, likewise, what makes social phenomena is individuals' thoughts and opinions. And once people realize that their individuality, their identity, their opinions and thought shape these social phenomena, they can be a bit dangerous for the entities that want to control that process. When I understand that the individual moment in which I chopped the wood was critical in producing the chair, I become aware of my importance in the work process. And so I resist the urge of the capitalist to throw me out of the work process, to claim that my contribution was worthless and I must be isolated. And so it's the same thing with political opinions and ideas. They matter in themselves as part of a social process. So what matters isn't the trailer that lays the structure of the film, but the individual moments that make the movie. But in the culture industry, those moments are deprived of their power. They are denied their participation in the process. Rather, they have two options: either leave the process altogether or become complicit with it, meaning that the individual moment becomes an advert for the whole. And so the trailer is, after all, an individual moment that became identical to the whole movie. It's an advertisement for an entire film. So advertisement is a neutralizer of individual moment. It turns individuality into pseudo-individuality by taking the individual moment and replacing it all over and over again. And so a celebrity basically becomes a face of everyone. It becomes the face of a brand, for example. Its identity becomes other than itself. And likewise, our identity must become that of the brand. So the celebrities identify themselves to the whole, and the whole identifies itself to the celebrity. Quote, the special effect, the trick, the isolated and repeatable individual performance have always conspired with the exhibition of commodities for advertising purposes. And today, every close-up of a film actress is an advert for her name. every hit song a plug for its tune. And of course, we cannot talk about advertisement without mentioning psychology. The culture industry has this in common with advertising. It uses techniques, skills in order to psychologically control the masses. Adorno and Horkheimer, they call this Psychotechnique. Quote, in both under the dictate of effectiveness, technique is becoming psychotechnique, a procedure for manipulating human beings. In both, the norms of the striking yet familiar, the easy but catchy, the worldly wise but straightforward hold good. Everything is directed at overpowering a consumer conceived as distracted or resistant. So what this means is that advertisement must create the conditions for the consumer to think what the consumer wants to think. It's about giving the consumer everything that he wants, but everything that we want isn't always coherent. As a matter of fact, it's rarely coherent. I mean, people often want contradictory things, but the culture industry and advertisement will make a synthesis of these things so that we feel that we have it all, that nothing is forgotten or left behind, that we didn't have to make a choice, if you want. We want things that are new, but we want familiar things as well. We want things easy to understand, but catchy in order to be remembered, etc. So advertisement is always promising us more of these things, and so it overpowers us in both being distracted by advertisement, but also in resisting its influence. Like nowadays, it's common to have cynical ads about the fact that they are ads. So advertising is seeking to enable the consumer to construct the power, to construct the perfect world, for himself, but only in their mind. And it is actively trying to turn everything or everyone into an idealist. And the way to do this is through language, by offering the consumer the perfect language to create the most perfect world for them to float in. Everyone can become God in their own little bubble, creating realities with the power of words. So the overpowering of the consumer is done in order for the consumer to contribute even more to advertisement. It's like a war general that wants overpowered soldiers so that they can fight for his glory. So here advertisement does the same. It overpowers or it empowers the consumer so that the consumer fights the war of advertisement. And so advertisement just wants to program people in a certain way so that it doesn't even have to coerce them into doing its bidding. So the consumer will, on his own, create the perfect reality for advertisement. Like advertising isn't God, but it created God so that God would have the power to create for advertising the perfect word for it. So advertising gave us a godlike power. So we became gods through advertisement. It gave us, that godlike power in order to create the world that advertisement wants. And as we said, that power comes from language. The consumer is given a language that would inevitably create the world desired by advertisement. As we know, languages are an essential part of culture, and advertisement is going to exploit that. The culture that the culture industry is promoting must be replicated everywhere, and language is therefore going to turn into advertisement for that culture. So whenever the consumer speaks, what must come from their mouth is advertisement for the dominant culture. Quote, through the language they speak, the consumers make their own contribution to culture as advertising. Now, how do we contribute to this culture through our language? Well, Adorno and Horkheimer, they argue that what the culture industry does to words is take away their function as substantial carriers of meaning, and instead they are turned into signs devoid of qualities. So what does this mean? Well, it simply means that words become transparent. They become devices for communication. This is a bit complicated, but we've actually explained this in the concept of enlightenment when we talked about magic and language. And Adorno and Horkheimer, they give a summary here about a summary of the theory of magic. If you remember, in the magical stage, words were not signs. To be a sign means that one, you are distinguished from the thing that you signify. The sign tree is not the same thing as the actual tree. And second, you are assigned arbitrarily to the thing you signify. It was random that the sign tree signifies the object called tree. In the magical phases, although words and things maintain a certain distance, they also maintained a fundamental link between them. The word tree in magic doesn't refer randomly to the tree, but there is a metaphysical link between them. So the word, if you want, is by essence linked to the thing. And that is why it is called a substantial carrier of meaning. The word tree really carries the meaning of the actual tree, not by convention or arbitrariness, but because there is something about that word that by necessity makes it the carrier of that particular meaning. So when words become signs, the word for the object that we call tree could be anything. We can say this is a cat by referring to trees, and everyone would be fine with it if it's what the social consensus has decided. And the decision is random, actually. Anything can be called a cat if we all agree on it. And so for this reason, signs don't have qualities. In magic, words have qualities, and it is those qualities that make us know which word applies to which object. The word tree has qualities of trees, and so it makes sense to call trees, well, trees. But the word and object share similar, both the word and the object share similar qualities. And that's why a tree must only be called with the word tree, unless we have other words for it that share its qualities. I mean, you can have different words for it since there are different languages, but in magical stages, all of them were thought to have qualities that make them appropriate for the object that they refer to. So this is what we mean for people who believe in magic when we say words have meaning. It's not about communication as much as it is about performing magic and summoning the actual thing. When words are forbidden or must be uttered in a certain context, it is because those words have the same qualities as the things that they are referring to. Why people fear some words, for example, when we talk about ghosts. Well, it's because talking about ghosts or talking about the dead, uttering the words that have the same qualities as ghosts is like having the ghosts around. And that is why you can also influence someone with your words. For magic believers, words have a magical power on us like actual spirits. You can, for example, get possessed by the words that have similar qualities as spirits, etc. So it's not about communication. When words become signs, they become meaningless. They have no qualities anymore, and so they don't carry anything. And they become carriers of whatever it is that we want to communicate. Now you can say that the magical theory of language is far-fetched, and yes, Adorno and Horkheimer don't believe that it is true. He's not saying that the magic believers are right. They just analyzing the political implications of it. Like the belief in magic has some political implications worth considering. It has some advantages over the culture industry. And that is, at least with magic, you did have some sort of belief in reality, whereas with communication, well, it is nihilism that prevails. Everything becomes about how to impose and dominate. Communication is about how can I frame something to get what I want from you in the most efficient way. Communication for Adorno and Horkheimer is about power. So words do lose their substantial meaning in this paradigm. All that matters in communication is the result. And therefore, when Enlightenment came about and made this radical distinction between signs and things, and said that signs have no substantial meaning to them, that's nominalism, if you remember. Well, you kind of established an even more radical idealism than the kind that you were criticizing. Like for Enlightenment, all the talk about words having qualities is just, metaphysical verbiage. It's just nonsense. It's just people who are projecting their fears onto the world. They think that what is going on in their minds correspond to reality. Remember that idealism is the belief that the content of your mind, so ideas, is reality. So Enlightenment was like, this is all obscure and weird, it stems from ignorance, and people should stop projecting their inner selves onto the world. That is animism, that is anthropomorphism and anthropocentrism. And it just makes things complicated for no reason when we can be pragmatic and have better results and better lives. How can you even know that words have qualities similar to their objects? It's an epistemological nightmare to say something like that, right? Quote, anything in a given sequence of letters which goes beyond the correlation to the event designated is banished as unclear and as verbal metaphysics. As a result, the word which henceforth is allowed only to designate something and not to mean it becomes so fixated on the object that it hardens to a formula. So the rejection of metaphysics and anything that would resemble it was presented as a rejection of idealism. And so now we will work with clear language, a language that refers to supernatural entities like words with qualities or ghosts and spirits. That's just going to confuse us and make us easier to manipulate by priests and magicians. So of course, there is some truth to this. The point of enlightenment is to liberate people from these fears and from the power of other men that use those fears to control them. But what Adorno and Horkheimer are saying is that enlightenment missed on the revolutionary potential of the metaphysics that it rejected, and because of that, it also missed on its own. It's also missed, missed on its own becoming metaphysics and magic. It didn't notice that it itself was becoming metaphysics and magic. So the clearer and the more logical enlightenment wanted to be, the more idealistic it was becoming. The less idealistic it wanted to be, the more idealistic it was becoming. Quote, the more purely and transparently they communicate what they designate, the more impenetrable they become. The demythologizing of language as an element of the total process of enlightenment reverts to magic. So communication ended into the crudest kind of idealism, where despite saying that words have no magical powers, you have created a worldview based on words that create reality. And that reality is just the content of your mind and your own interests. And so this is what reality has been reduced to. Deprived from metaphysics, what enlightenment was hoping to find turned out to be as empty and hollow as the metaphysics that it criticized, if not more, So if magic and metaphysics were just abstractions that reduced reality to just fears and fantasies, enlightenment didn't do better either. So reality is just reduced to signs now, even though nominalism says that reality is the physical and not the signs. So if the physical exists in nominalism, any attempt at grasping it would lead to metaphysics, and so we are fated to always be alienated from reality. So the belief in God is just one last attempt to maintain a contact with that reality, but you then have to embrace idealism and metaphysics again. So, however you look at it, Enlightenment brought the death of meaning and has reduced reality to a more radical idealism and gave way to more irrational superstitions. It just led to greater impoverishment of experiencing reality with its, insistence on purifying language from metaphysics and or magical influence. Quote, instead of raising a matter to the level of experience, the purified word exhibited as a case of an abstract moment, and everything else severed from now defunct expression by the demand for pitiless clarity, therefore withers in reality also. So the impoverishment of experience lies in the fact that the reality of things lies in what they are called, whereas in magic it was the other way around. With magic it was the richness of reality that create how its objects are called. So reality gives rise to words. With Enlightenment, however, words now give rise to reality. And the danger is obvious. Those in power can then do what Socrates feared with the sophists. They can turn the strong argument into the weak and the weak into the strong. And so what is evil can become good. Evil things like, for example, genocide. In magic, they would be dreadful because they are dreadful events. Now they can be good, they can be a mission, they can be a national duty, they can be self-protection, while those who actually fight off and resist their genocides, they are called terrorists. It must remind you of something today. And so Adorno and Horkheimer, they refer to the Hitler Youth and the black shirts. So the black shirts are a term to designate fascists in Italy, and he compares them with football positions. He says that all of them are nothing more but what they are called, suggesting that how we determine fascism isn't even about what fascism even is, or it really, or what it really does, but it is a matter of convention, like the rules of a football game. So the word of outside left player in football is to score goals. It is to get results, and fascists are just doing the same. They're just getting results. They are cleaning the streets of filth, for example. Hence, they can justify the lies that they accuse the metaphysician of doing while denying the actual longing of people. Quote, if before its rationalization the word had set free not only longing but lies, in its rationalized form it has become a straight jacket, more for longing than for lies. So when people believed in magic, rationalization accused them of setting no limits for longing and lies. Priests, prophets, metaphysicians, magicians, they lie to everyone and impose their longing, their desires onto reality. That's the projection of animism that we talked about. But then rationalization has simply prevented people from having any longing. Whenever desire or longing manifests itself, it's accused of being irrational. But lies haven't been stopped. The restriction was restricted only to longing. Lies, however, have been set free with no limits. Like data is used to make anyone who, for example, dream of better societies seem like an idealist, like someone who tries to impose their longing on reality, while at the same time, data is used to make the tyrant and the dictator's lies a reality. So the only concept of fairness and objectivity here is that people chose to agree with my reality. This is the only criteria for truth that came with Enlightenment. Like I know that I am bullshitting, but people agreed on this bullshit. I didn't force them to, they willingly agreed, they voted, they bought my merchandise, they watched my movie, they listened to my hit song, they read my magazine. And so this is the only point of communication. Get people to do what I want them to do, but without direct coercion. It achieves it through the positivist data register. Like language therefore becomes only that, a dispassionate data register that restricts longing while setting lies free. So the Führer, for example, tells it like it is. He has his own longing restricted. He's just following the data. He's just calling the Jews a parasite, not because he wants to impose his worldview, but that's because what the data shows. He calls a Jew what he really is. And since people have agreed, then what is the fuss about? So language is therefore limited to just registering data and nothing else. It stops all kinds of longing, which means that it also makes it impossible to form any relationship with reality. By the simple fact of calling a Jew a parasite, the word prevents you from forming any relationship with him. So, not because, the Jew and the word parasite have similar qualities. You can call him an angel if you want, it won't help either. The point is that you cannot form a direct relationship with anything except by the immediacy of an authority point. And that is the data. It's the data that tells you what a thing is and how you can act toward it. So you can have only positive words to refer to something, but those words, since they are the product of a positivist rationalization, they maintain you alienated from the thing that they signify. Just like the Nazis are alienated from each other, they are also alienated from the Jews, despite that they have different words with different connotations to refer to each group. So it's like when your parents tell you who you are allowed to be friends with, because they have some knowledge that they can give you. They don't have to hide their reasons, but you're just not getting it. Like they can give you even some data about how people you want to be friends with are dangerous, like 80% of people who listen to rock and roll have used drugs or stuff like that. Like they bring in these weird facts and you don't know even if they are true. But the end result is you make relationship with neither the people that you wanted to be friends with, nor those your parents told you to be friends with. And so that's kind of what's going on here. By removing the function of language as a substantial carrier of meaning, you alienate yourself from that meaning, regardless of the connotation of the words. But this ability to alienate us from relationship is like casting a spell. Quote, thus relationships themselves become impenetrable, taking on and impact a power of adhesion and repulsion which makes them resemble their extreme antithesis, spells. So like your parents use their authority to pretend that they are being objective, right? The point of registering data is to get rid of every element that suggests magic or superstition. That way I appear like coming from a place of objectivity. But this new ability for science to make us follow the speech of the data is also working like spells. You know, the Nazis who hated the Jews because of a demythologized language of science were pretty much people living in a cult. Like they were hypnotized by the rational words of the Führer, like how now Zionists do with Israel to justify their hatred towards Palestinians. By the mentioning of certain words like homelands, the charismatic authorities, they do practices on their listeners that sound a lot like the ancient ways of sorcery. Like the word homeland suddenly exonerates all the evil that has been going on. You know, making a genocide is horrible, but throw in it's for the homeland, and all of a sudden, all the evil has been purged. You know, all the vileness of committing a genocide has been purged. It now becomes a divine mission. It becomes, justice to kill hundreds of thousands of people. And so the same principle is at play when government welfare is halted by the mentioning of bureaucracy and intellectuals. Whenever you promote welfare programs, your opponents only have to shout bureaucracy. to make you flee from any idea that the poor and the destitute need support. And you just need to be called an intellectual in order to lose all credibility. Like you're just acting like you know things because of theories and books, but they are just, intellectual masturbation. Just a bunch of idealistic losers trying to impress us with their artificial theories and worldviews. That is the meaning of an intellectual, by the way. Back then, being called an intellectual, it was an insult. Like today, when we call someone a philosopher in Tunisia. Titfelsif, that's how we say it in Tunisian. When you say to someone titfelsif, you are philosophizing. It means that you are saying bullshit, but in a way that seems knowledgeable. Likewise, Adorno and Horkheimer give the example of the name of the diva that a producer shouts in a recording studio. If you try to make music that is difficult to advertise, the producer be like, Diana Ross, and you understand what it means. Diana Ross sells records, okay? Or if you shout Beyonce, this is someone who will sell records. It's statistically proven. The data shows that all music must be produced as a copy of Rihanna or of Diana Ross or of Beyonce. When you sing, you must sing like Diana Ross. So even when you try to be different from Ross, even when you try to be innovative, you must be different and innovative like Diana Ross. Like Diana Ross was different and innovative from those who came before her. So there is no arguing with the data. Once they are evoked, it's like all the argument you've been given about the necessity not to abide to algorithms and markets. All that argument has been obliterated by that one name. Kind of like with magic. With mentioning just one name, you can destroy an entire coherent argument for why you shouldn't abide to the laws of the market. So the name therefore becomes a generic tool to submit the particular to the universal. And it can do this because it is, as Adorno and Horkheimer call, an archaic residue. It has a legacy of being linked to magical powers, especially first names or proper names. Quote, the name to which magic most readily attaches is today undergoing a chemical change. It is being transformed into arbitrary, manipulable designations, the power of which, although calculable, is for that reason as willful as that of archaic names. So today the power of names is used like stylizing brands, like Diana Ross. That's more of her surname or nickname or stage name rather than her real names. Rappers, for example, do this a lot. Eminem is more Eminem than Marshall Mathers. So the name of the celebrity becomes its brand, and like brands, it becomes a symbol for power. Just by mentioning it, you are like doing something to your listeners. Like fans who gain their identity by partaking in the power of the celebrity. Being a fan of Beyonce, of Taylor Swift, or Harry Styles makes it seem like you are partaking in their power. And so celebrity names become hyper-individualistic, to the point where the individual becomes so broad that it absorbs the collective into it. Like everyone in the collective refers to the celebrity's name in order to feel like they exist. Likewise, generic names like Bob and Harry do the same. Their bourgeois lineage made them change themselves. Bourgeois individuality was always dependent on the family heritage, and it seemed old-fashioned, and so they switched to common generic names that make people replaceable, like on a sports team. And so with such paradigms, the names become a way for alienating people, to make them unable to form true connections. They can only do so only if they are members of a homogeneous collective. Quote, such forms of interaction reduce human beings to the brotherhood of the sporting public, which protects them from true fraternity. Signification, the only function of the word admitted by semantics, is consummated in the sign. So it's like saying I am a fan of football team X, and therefore I can only be recognized and accepted only by people who belong to the same homogeneous group. The common names only reinforce how replaceable I am, since my identity is itself a generic one. And so the name is therefore just a sign to better categorize me. As Bob, I am also a Lakers fan. I like Marvel movies. I listen to mundane pop music. I follow what the fashion tells me to follow, what my name tells me to follow, what my parents, the state, the boss, the capitalist system, gender, race, economic class, etc. I simply follow and repeat what I've been told to repeat, whether I've been told so from above or from my equal peers. And as such, Adorno and Horkheimer, they argue there isn't much difference between the democracy of America, with its obsession over fashion and advertisement, and the fascist leaders in Europe during the 30s and the 40s. As he writes, if the German fascists launch a word like intolerable over the loudspeakers one day, the whole nation is saying intolerable the next. So all names and words have become a fashion trend, a fad. Like your name advertises your social class, your favorite band and artist, your favorite team and food. Every word we utter must advertise the culture industry. It must repeat the dominant ideology. And so the more it is repeated, the more universal it sounds. And the more universal it sounds, the more reasons the people promotes it under the guise of it's universal. It is what the people want. So in the end, advertisement is first, advertisement for advertisement. So advertisement is therefore totalitarianism. Everything must only serve its replication and preservation. Nothing in this world is allowed to exist if it doesn't promote something else. In other words, everything is allowed to exist only as an ad for another ad. And this is what makes it totalitarian. The totalitarian state argues that everything must serve only the state, right? Everything has only the right to exist as a servant to the state. Every aspect of your life must serve only one thing. And so advertising is then forcing us to be marketable in order to serve it. And as such, everything that can distract us from serving the totalitarian power must be, well, castrated. It must lose its ability to resist. If the thing itself is a double-edged sword, like magic, it can both serve the totalitarian power and its opposition, we must make sure that the undesirable part of it is not used. So you cannot kill magic, but you can kill the magician if you want. So let's make sure that people don't have access to it, so that only the totalitarian power can utilize it for its own purposes. You can lie that magic is dead and it is gone, so that people won't try to use it. Call your magic rationality, so that whenever someone from the dominant manages to reach magic, they'll have to also call it rationality, and so they will use it for the interests of the totalitarian power. So advertisement is that power, and so magic must be called advertisement. Whenever it is used, it must be done to further divide and weaken people. People are not allowed to have relationships and connections based on their humanity and individuality, but only on advertising. If they want those things, they can only experience them in their advertised form. So the only thing advertisement strengthens is people's submission to it. It can only be used to self-advertisement at best. To speak about oneself, to be in communication, is to learn how to present yourself like you are writing a billboard. In communication exercises, when you are asked to introduce yourself, you are basically asked the following assignment. Imagine that you are a product. Tell us what to put on the billboard to promote you. Quote, the layer of experience which made words human-like those who spoke them has been stripped away. And in its prompt appropriation, language takes on the coldness which hitherto was peculiar to billboards and the advertising sections of newspapers. countless people use words and expressions which they either have ceased to understand at all or use only according to their behavioral functions, just as trademarks adhere all the more compulsively to their objects, the less their linguistic meaning is apprehended. So the language of advertisement and communication make people use words without understanding them. The point, after all, isn't to understand or convey meaning, it is to communicate. We communicate for the sake of communication. You can say gibberish if you want, if something got communicated, and especially something that serves advertising, then congratulations. That's all that we are asking for. This is particularly revealing in the speeches of politicians who use terms that have the magic register but without its meaning. When ministers of education talk about the youth as dynamic forces or as potential, or when entrepreneurs talk about creativity or resilience, or when hit songs talk about reveries and rhapsodies, these words have meaning if we were thinking in terms of magic or even metaphysics. But here they are just used willy-nilly for marketing purposes. So the minister himself doesn't know what are dynamic forces. If he knew, he'll see that the only way to actually bring them about is by dismantling the current educational system that he is in charge to promote. Like, you are giving the position to promote a system that precisely kills dynamic forces. So you are told to use the words to make people think. Like, the only way to have dynamic forces is through that particular system that you are promoting. So people themselves, not knowing what it means, think that it must be something good since it is being told by the minister. This is the association thinking that we mentioned in a previous section, where you only think through association. By association, the system, by associating the system to dynamic forces, and since it is the minister who said it, you associate the position of the minister. It's someone who is supposed to know what he's talking about. Why else would he be a minister? So you associate that position to the term. It's from the minister, so it must be good. So the system must be good because it promotes dynamic power, the dynamic forces. Plus, education is associated with youth. Youth is associated with vitality, with dynamism, and with force. And so these are later associated with growth and strength. So whatever these dynamic forces are, they must be good for the youth. And you follow that path and end up with the system that the minister talks about, and you realize that it is the only thing that allows us to have those dynamic forces. And so the system must be good and true because it brings these dynamic forces. And so there I just made an ad for the educational system using words that have no meaning whatsoever. People don't have to know that we are talking what we are talking about when using creativity, or even what's a rhapsody. They hear it in a hit song and that's it. And so that way the revolutionary potential of words is also destroyed. Words turn into stereotypes, concepts that we can never experience in real life. We are denied to experience the dynamic forces because if we do, well, we will start a freaking revolution. And so we will understand what is fraternity, what is equality, what is creativity, what is reverie, and even memory. And we'd be like, fuck the bullshit of the minister. Quote, other stereotypes such as memory are still partly comprehended, but become detached from the experience which might fulfill them. They obtrude into the spoken language like enclaves. In such terms, a phrase, the last bond between sedimented experience and language, which still exerted a reconciling influence in dialect in the 19th century, is severed. So that's the goal of advertising. It cuts the relation between language and experience. We don't experience anything of language, but we trust that others do. The Führer experiences reality, not us, but when we listen to his voice in the radio, when we listen to his speech, when we hear this is the Hitler Youth speaking, we are reassured. We can experience again reality through the speech of the Führer, through the eyes of the Führer. So the words of advertising are totalitarian in the sense that only they allow experience. It is by speaking like the Führer that you get to experience reality. It is by repeating the words of the Führer, the words that he utters. Only when you talk like the Hitler Youth, you can experience these dynamic forces of life. And so words have become petrified and alien to experience. Only the experience of totalitarian power is allowed. And so paradoxically, words cannot even change, and they often become fixed. By taking away the meanings of words, you'd expect to see no fixed words for things, but language becomes even more rigid when you take away the meaning. The fluidity of language was actually guaranteed when it had meaning, when words were appropriate to their objects. You had room for transformation, for reverie, and for creativity. The bond between words and experience were actually guaranteed when words had their magical link with things. But once that got taken away, words now become whatever the power wants them to be. And as such, they can only consolidate even more that power, making sure that no word can question it. And so that is why it is during the death of meaning that you can witness the purging of words from any foreign influence. So Adorno gives the example of the term Schriftleiter, which is in an asterisk. I'm not sure that I pronounced it right. He writes the term Schriftleiter, which literally means director of writing, was preferred by the nationalist socialists to the foreign word redacteur. So, not sure about the pronunciation, but you can verify if you want. Wanting a language that only reflects the homogeneity of an ideology or of a nation is how you make your language petrified and alien. Nothing can allude to something that exists outside of the territory or the folk community. And so at least the fascist folk community. But can there be a folk community that purges language for its foreign element without becoming fascist? Even if it says that the elements it purges are fascists, that is debatable. But the point is that fascism does great violence to language and to tongues. A tongue isn't allowed to be different, to have a different tone, or to utter anything that isn't included in the language of the folk community. So all tongues are cut off even though they keep uttering words. And this violence is so deep, so internal, that it's not even audible. People listen to the radio without realizing the castrated tongues of the speaker, since their ears too have been castrated as well. All they hear is a monotonous tongue and rhythm with nothing outside of it. Since they know nothing of the outside, they cannot claim to be in chains. They are free in the bubble that advertisement has created for them. You cannot say that you are a slave if freedom doesn't exist outside the word of slavery. So freedom is whatever the limits of your world allows you to have. As he writes, all are free to dance and amuse themselves, just as since the historical neutralization of religion, they have been free to join any of the countless sects. So we are simply free to choose an ideology among the countless ideologies produced by the culture industry. Like when people are told that they are free in a supermarket because they have over 200 kinds of potato chips wrappers. We are just free to be the same, if you want. Our world is a world of sameness, and there is no difference that lies beyond it. There is nothing particular about each individual, as vulgar depth psychology about personality types keep reminding us. Everything about us is only surface level. The depth of individuality is just a surface that we hide by another surface. And so the only thing left is to be forced into conformism. That forces us to adopt different superfluous personalities, only to be reminded that we are just that. We are just superficial. Like everyone is told that everything is a lie, but you must also choose to live by a lie and pretend that it is not. That is, by the way, the road of success, right? Fake it till you make it. You know that it's all bullshit, but you do it anyways. Quote, the way in which the younger accepts and performs the obligatory date, the tone of voice used on the telephone and in the most intimate situations, the choice of words in conversation, indeed the whole inner life compartmentalized according to the categories of vulgarized depth psychology, bears witness to the attempt to turn oneself into an apparatus meeting the requirement of success. An apparatus which, even in its unconscious, conforms to the model, unconscious impulses, conforms to the model presented by the culture industry. So, conformism under the culture industry simply means living your entire life scared that you will be exposed for who you truly are. A regular asshole that has nothing special. So you conform by pretending in a culture that encourages you to pretend while punishes pretenders. While it punishes pretenders. And so as Adorno and Horkheimer say, concluding this long chapter on the triumph of the culture industry, the most intimate reactions of human beings have become so entirely reified even to themselves, that the idea of anything peculiar to them survives only in external abstraction. Personality means hardly more than dazzling white teeth and freedom from body odor and emotions. That is the triumph of advertising in the culture industry, the compulsive imitation of consumers of cultural commodities, which at the same time they recognize as false. And that's it. We finished the chapter on the culture industry, the longest of the book. Next week we are going to start reading from the first excursus, which is on Odysseus and the myth of enlightenment, and yeah. So this is basically it. The culture industry has won. It triumphed because, well, everything that we do is just to promote sameness. Actually, the culture industry, I think it wasn't finished the first time it was published, because there is an asterisk on false, and in 1944, after false, there was a to be continued written. So they were going to, I don't know if they were going to write something else, something more about the culture industry, or that they were unsure about the future of the culture industry, like maybe the culture industry, I mean, maybe we will be free from the culture industry, but you know, by removing to be continuous, maybe they mean that that's it. I mean, the culture industry has won. We are not seeing any way out of it. So yeah, this is a puzzling book, and yeah, I mean that's all I have. That's all I have to say. Hopefully this was helpful to you, and it made things clearer about the culture industry. Make sure to subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching, and